Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Pilgrims in a Holy Land. I am here with Cindy again tonight, and we are doing things. I am actually working. So this is, I guess it's probably not backwards. This is a kana quilt, like the Japanese kana, like the alphabet. I started this years ago, and so I work on it every now and again. And it's going to be like an alphabet chart kind of a thing. And each one will have like an animal embroidered on it as well. But yeah, so
Yes.
that's what I'm trying to finish that up.
And
I'm
starting on making handmade Christmas cards.
Mm.
As I progress, I will show. It's going to be a paper inlay card where I have shapes that I've cut out of various colors.
And I hear the cat as well.
Yes, Jackson's in the background. And so, this is a very tedious process, but it looks so nice when it's done.
Handcrafted cards are so beautiful. Lots of fun things to do with them too. So we're going to talk about Santa and different things about Santa, whatever kind of comes up in the conversation there. So we were going to talk about the Shepherd of Hermas, and then we were talking about it, and I realized that it's like St. Nick Day, and I'm like, well, this would be an appropriate conversation. So we're doing this one, and then next time we're going to do the Shepherd of Hermas.
Yes, but yes, St. Nicholas Day is tomorrow.
So yeah, good time for a conversation about that.
Yes.
And hi, everybody in the chat. Welcome, and glad you're joining us tonight. Glad to see you, Mary. Glad to see you, Amber. Very happy to have you guys with us, even if you can only join us for a little bit. And so I grew up, and I was thinking about this. I don't remember, was our first episode together, was that with the Christmas carols and hymns?
No, we did a couple
earlier ones after this.
Yeah,
this was our first regular one.
Yeah,
or something.
I think we had done one, and then we had Mike join us, and you kept popping in and out. So then it was Mike and I talking about Christmas carols.
Yes, I'm glad that over time my technical difficulties have adjusted and gotten better.
Yes, and I mean, I still remember how we were talking about Away in the Manger and how I really don't like that as much because it doesn't portray the infant Jesus as a real infant. I mean, no crying he makes and all of that. And it's like, yeah, well, I'm sure he pooped his pants just like everybody else. He could have had colic for all we know,
Right. He was a true human. So yeah, absolutely.
Normal baby stuff happened to normal babies.
Yeah. So the question is Santa a human or not? That's kind of a dubious question. And yes, but also I don't know. And it's an interesting question. But growing up, I never celebrated St. Nicholas Day. I thought, oh, that's a Catholic thing. We don't do that. And I understood it and heard about it from the perspective of, back then at school, they would actually teach about Christmas traditions around the world in school. You probably don't do that these days. But
I think some places like where they're starting to mandate, if you want to have funding in, Tennessee or somewhere in the South, if you want to have funding for your schools, you have to have the Bible in your classroom. It does not have to be the Trump Bible, but originally they were suggesting that one. Growing up, I was not as familiar with St. Nicholas Day, but there was Santa Lucia Day, a similar thing. Especially know that Lucia, uh, she was from like Italy, but she was super big in like Germany and Norway and Sweden, and I don't quite know why. But what I do recall is, and they did it at our church, and my mother was the gal, and she had a wreath of evergreen boughs with live burning candles on top of her hair. And my mother
Oh,
had waist long hair. It was very stressful. And and then when I went to Gustavus, which is a Swedish liberal arts college here in Minnesota, they also celebrated Santa Lucia Day, and yeah, it was live burning candles on a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl's head. And it had to do, I mean, similar things about put out your stocking and you'll get a gift and all of those types of things. So yes, that's a Swedish thing. Anyway, so between St. Nicholas Day and Santa Lucia Day, there seems to be some overlap of traditions, and it's earlier than Christmas in the month of December.
right, right, right. So you mentioned having some sort of celebration or something going on. What does that look like for you?
So, at my church now, Eastern Orthodox Church, uh, this week, we will be celebrating St. Nicholas. St. Nicholas, the real person who lived in the 2nd century. He was born around 280 AD in Turkey, Asia Minor. And although he was very wealthy, he was known for his generosity in giving to the poor. There's a rumor that he provided dowries for 3 young women that were not well off and needed help, and he did it secretly. And he also, throughout his life, he helped children. He was generous. And then there's something about him also being the patron saint of sailors. So, yeah, a bunch of different things. I don't know if you have anything more about him, but on Sunday, then the children will have story time where we actually tell the stories of the real St. Nicholas. And he was a bishop, and, the things that he did. And then I know the children are having a service project where they are going to be assembling bags of supplies to give to the homeless. So like they were asking for, sample size deodorants and soaps and, cleansing wipes and gloves and those heat things for your hands, to keep them warm, and socks, a stocking cap, just a nice little package of things to sustain them. I think something, oh yes, here's Jackson. Something to sustain their day. There's also going to be a beverage and like a nutrition bar. So
Oh, very nice.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's a good tradition.
yeah, it'll be nice. The kids will, be encouraged to give to people that are less fortunate in memory of the things that the real St. Nicholas did.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they
Is
are
there?
going to have a Santa type figure that will come, and he will be dressed much more in a traditional bishop garb, although I do believe it's still a crimson red color, so that it's Santa Claus-ish.
Right. When I went to the post office this last week, I had to mail something off, and one of the guys behind the counter had big white beard, like a real beard, and he had the most beautiful Santa robe. It was gorgeous. It
Uh,
was like
is he like a
red and green and with the fur, and like it was one of the fancy ones, really nice.
wow?
And with a hat, and I'm like, it's not cold in here. I don't know how you can manage to stand behind the counter with wearing that all day long, but it looked so nice though. And just a fun thing to go to the post office and see that.
Yeah, no kidding.
In Eastern Orthodoxy, do they have any sort of tradition with stockings or anything like that? Or
Mm, again, I think the tradition with it is that that would be one way that Saint Nicholas would secretly help give to children and the less fortunate
right,
by
right.
putting stuff in their stockings,
Mm-hmm.
similar to what you see on some of those Christmas cartoons.
Right. And that's probably mostly where my ideas of Saint Nick come from, is old Disney cartoons,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of
Santa
old,
Claus is
just,
coming to town, and
yeah,
Rudolph, and
yeah, like the cricket by the hearth, or, movies like that from way back in the day. That's where I get all of that imagery from. And I always did like the ideas and the stories behind it, like the throwing of the coin that lands. I don't even remember the details. I just remember the imagery of it, of Santa going along to different houses and doing that in secret in these different ways, and how they got the charity that he was giving in secret ways.
yes.
So we know that St. Nicholas was a real person and that he did things. Do you think he actually punched Arias, though?
They say that at the Council of Nicaea, uh, um, if he didn't punch him, they had words, because Arius was definitely known as a heretic and was leading many churches astray. And I mean, that was part of the reason why the bishops had assembled, is to deal with the whole Arian controversy. And it spread. I mean, it was especially prevalent in France and that area. So it is quite possible that that Saint Nick may have lost his temper and taken a swing at Arius.
Very possible. There was at least the conflict.
Yes.
And I admit, I really like the memes that you see every year, where you have the icon of Saint Nick, or just a popular image of Santa, whichever, and he is doing that, because it kind of highlights and makes you think about it, makes you think about, why did this matter? Why would this be important enough that even if this didn't happen, it's kind of an idea to talk about, because of, like, what does it mean to even be a heretic, and why does that matter? Is it just about like closing the ranks and making sure that we know who's a Christian and we know who's not a Christian? Like, is that the meaning of it, or is there something different? Right? Like, he's not going to punch somebody because of some casual reason. I mean, I guess people do punch other people for casual reasons, but the purpose of the story is whether or not happened, is the seriousness of the issue and why it matters.
Right. Do you have background on what Arianism represented or what they believed?
Oh, yeah. So this was the disagreement surrounding the Trinity, right? Is Jesus a created being, or is he really God? How do we describe him in a creed so that everybody actually knows what we're talking about when we're talking about this? because, and, people, it's kind of late that this is happening. It's not super early in the church where we have the Council of Nicaea and all of these things that are going on. So it's not like people haven't had issues before about the nature of Jesus and who he is. And, so when I grew up, I didn't hear the name Arian growing up in the LDS church, but my teachers would tell me stories about how, well, the early church, there was an apostasy in the early church. This is the LDS story. There was an apostasy in the LDS, the apostasy in the early church. And because there was an apostasy after the apostles all died, we lost all of the truth, and we didn't really understand a whole lot of doctrine, and we didn't understand the gospel, and importantly, we lost the ordinances of the gospel. We didn't really have the priesthood. The priesthood was lost, and all of these things were lost early on. And like I said, Arian didn't really live all that early in this grand scope of things.
No, and this is like around 300 where this is happening.
So that's early, but not super, super early, right? And so I got to my religious education in my college years, my LDS religious education, got into a class where we were talking about the early church, and my teacher he brought up Arian, or Arias, sorry. And he said, look, even in the 300s, there was still a kernel of the truth. And so from the LDS perspective, the heretic was the right one and the church was all wrong. And so the story there would be that Saint Nick, would be out of line to punch Arias because of the fact that he was actually one of the few that held on to the truth. And that was one of the big moments of the cracks in my faith. Like, it had already started crumbling before that. I already had a lot of questions and things, but I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And I tried talking to my teacher a little bit more and bringing out the thoughts and ideas that he was teaching and the official doctrine of the LDS Church and all that. I was like, that's not early. And so if there's a great apostasy, how could it have happened during the apostles' time, and yet somebody is still holding on to this massive truth and being called out a heretic when everybody else is wrong? I'm like, that doesn't really fly for me. That's not a good explanation.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, that's what was going on, was this cherry picking of when we see something in the early church or something the early church fathers say, then we will pull the things that we agree with and will disagree with everything else they will say, right? Like when the phrase that they liked, one of the phrases they like to pull is the whole becoming God thing, right? It's a real quote from a real church father, but the quote comes from an actual defense of the Trinity. I thought you don't get to cherry pick quotes from people, because that's not what he was teaching. So that's an interesting little sidebar from my perspective of why it matters that we have this idea of what heresy is in doctrine, and the fact that we have the church in a basically unified state of like you go to Justin Martyr in his description of what the Trinity is, right? It's kind of the earliest place we can see the formulation, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that here at some point.
And Irenaeus too is,
mm-hmm.
He's starting to develop those creedal statements, and
right.
We'll get into that in a couple more sessions.
Yeah.
And he's talking about, And I mean, he does have the concept of the Trinity. He is arguing that, Christ is God and man, but they're noodling on it, and they're trying to describe it in philosophical terminology. And there isn't language within philosophy that actually could truly represent the phenomenon of Christ having two natures and the Trinity being three in one, and all of that. So they're struggling to describe what they know and what they see and what they've been taught and what's been handed down.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, and so you see, with when the bishops would get together, they were working really hard to solidify this is what we believe. And if you don't believe it, like Nestorius, he goes off and does his own thing. And it's like, if you can't believe this, if you cannot agree to the creed, then you are a heretic, because you are not walking in alignment with the proper definition.
And again, it's stuff that they have been talking about for a long time, dealing with all kinds of Gnostic tendencies and all of that. Like it's just boom, time after time after time that they're dealing with this stuff. And so it's not just suddenly, oh, look, Arias has the truth and that everyone else is not. No, they were looking at things and saying, well, we see the consequence of what you're teaching here, and it's bad, because the consequence of what you're teaching means that what Christ did was not offering us salvation.
Correct.
So
anything that is not assumed is not saved. And so that is why Christ had to be human. But the only one that could do certain things, like come back from the dead, is God. So he's both. How does that work? And so talking about Mary and, what did she bring to the mix? Why is, and, so then it's, you can hear them talking about she's the second Eve, and she's Eve who makes the right choice. It's not a selfish thing. She gives up her own interests. I am what you want me to be. Do with me what you want. I will follow this path, even though I know it's going to be and bring in embarrassment and shame on me, because I'm going to be pregnant with a child and I'm not married yet. And and although I'm betrothed, how is my husband gonna accept this? This is gonna be weird. And even Jesus was, where is he really from? And that there's aspersions that are cast on his heritage.
Right. Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. And so you can see the talk about heresy and dogma and all that as this kind of borderline thing, and it's not like it's not that, but there's a reason it matters. There's a reason it's important. I mean, like, if you accept the Bible at all and the existence of God as our good sovereign creator who comes to save us in any form, then you don't want to spurn his character or say something against his character, right? That's a bad thing. And so it confuses me when people who proclaim to believe in God will occasionally come and say, well, we shouldn't be all so particular about all of this. And just because they decided that this was orthodoxy doesn't mean that it really has to be. Like, no, there's purpose and meaning and like intent behind that.
Right. I mean, they were
Rather than
so careful, so very, very, very careful. And then to just, because of time passing and divisions within the church and the Enlightenment and all of that, to have a modern scholar now saying, "Ah, well, you know, we can take this part and we can leave this part." And it's like, no, if you go back to the Orthodox Church and how they hang on to those original tradition. I mean, that's why I became Orthodox. It was just that once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And the richness that's there, and also the viewpoint that is just so different, but than the evangelical world that I was brought up in.
right.
Yeah, it's not casual. It is not just words.
Mm-hmm.
These were chosen specifically for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's about our relationship with God and who he is, and all of these really deeply important questions. If you're going to be a Christian, if you're going to be a God-fearer in any way, then you need to understand who God is, and you need to understand why Christ was able to do what he did and how he is to be worshipped as well. So one of the interesting things, I always thought this was fun. So my mom, she was into doing ceramics, where somebody pours the ceramic mold and you get the wet ceramic, and then you clean off the little edges of it and have it fired. And then after it's fired, you get to paint it, and all that. She was very much into that when I was growing up. A very fun project and type of thing to do. It's not so easy to find these days. Like, you can find the finished ceramics, but man, those unfinished ones are fun to do. They're really fun.
We have a place, I don't know if we still have it, but several years ago, well, not even within the past 10 years, it was called like Paint Your Plate, where you could go and get the greenware stuff and just go into the store and pick a cup or a vase or a whatever, glaze it, they'd fire it for you, and then you'd have your piece.
Right. And I guess those are still pretty popular. I think we have a couple of those in town. But like the ones my mom would do, she could go through the whole catalog, and the place she would go had hundreds of molds just lining the shelves, so many. And a lot of them were super detailed. And so several times I went and got to pick out what I wanted to do and have them pour it and all of that. And it's a very fun thing to do. I should do it again. But one of the things she had, and she still has this, and I should have snagged a picture of it to put up. But so she did like nativities, and she did like Christmas trees and reindeer. But this is one of the coolest ones. It's got Santa, and he's kneeling in front of the manger with Jesus. And Santa has his hat off, and so he's praying to Jesus. And I just always have loved that. The idea that, yes, we have Christmas, and yes, there's the story of Santa going on that we kind of participate in, but Santa is subservient to Jesus. And the story of, even though we didn't participate in St. Nick's Day, there's still the idea that we had that was perpetuated in my family, that Santa was doing what he did out of charity because of Christ. And that was a big theme for my family. I always really appreciated that.
That was nice, because My experience with Santa was much more the commercial side. We had Dayton's, which was eventually bought by Macy's, but you'd go, Dayton's was one of the premier stores, a fancy store that you'd go, and they had a display that they would put on every year. And you'd walk through all of these scenes and see different stories, like Scrooge or whatever the theme was for that year. The Grinch Stole Christmas, different things. And then at the end, you'd go and have your picture taken with Santa. And so I have pictures of me, like probably 2 years till I was, 7 or 8. And then when my sister was there, it would be the two of us sitting on his lap and stuff like that. And so going, and then, I did the same thing with Andrew for the first 5, 6 years, where we'd go and find a Santa and have his picture taken with Santa. And I remember on Christmas Eve, we always, we had church. I was often either singing in the choir or in the Christmas pageant, where you have the shepherd and Mary and Joseph and the baby and all of that and sing songs. And then we'd go to my grandma's house and my cousins would be there. And even my other grandparents were invited because both my grandparents lived in the same town. And so Christmas Eve was with my mom's family and Christmas Day was with my dad's family, which was good because we didn't have far to drive and share and stuff like that. So anyway, we'd go to my grandma's and she would have one of the neighbors dress up and come and do ho, 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 and be Santa, bringing us a special gift that she had gotten. Like one year I got a tambourine or something like that, just some special things. So, but Santa was not religious to me. He was commercial,
purely commercial.
Yeah. And I was like, we don't have a fireplace. How does he come down? All those questions about, does he have a key? How does he get in our house? And then you start getting afraid of strangers coming into your house and freaked out. Then there was, when Andrew was little, he was trying to figure out who was Santa, and is Santa real? And so then he would hide his camera and try to video whoever Santa was. I thought, busted, you're not getting, And then one year he was like, I know who Santa Claus is. And I'm like, oh, who is it? Oh, it's Karen Beatty, one of the other moms at daycare. Like, wow, she must be a busy woman. I wonder how she gets all that done, that she's Santa. And he was just so mad because I wouldn't fess up that, at our house, it's.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, Karen Beatty? I didn't know that. I'm going to have to ask her that the next time I see her.
That's funny. Yeah. So, we still had, the commercial side of things. We would go take pictures. I always thought that was creepy. Why are we doing this? So I didn't make my kids. The only time I did it with my kids was there was this time at Cabela's where they had real reindeer. I'm like, well, we got to see the reindeer, and you're passing by Santa to do that. So that's fine, whatever. If you guys want to do that, you can. And so they had the choice. I wasn't like, you're going to go sit on Santa's lap. I'm like, we're going to go see the reindeer. If you want to sit on Santa's lap and have a picture, then you can. So it was totally up to them. And then there was one year, which we'd never done anything like this, but my neighbors, I had a really good, it's a really good neighborhood. This was the year when my kids went around saying trick or carrot instead of trick or treat. And my neighbors gave them carrots and apples and asparagus, and my kids were thrilled. Oh, wow. Absolutely thrilled. So this was a really nice neighborhood. So they had somebody professional, I think it was a professional, who came to their house and their grandkids or whatever. And so they sent him to our house, which was really sweet because my kids were at that age where it was just really fun for them. And
Mm-hmm.
he gave them like a stuffed animal each, and they were like, they loved those. So that was like one of those solid memories for them.
Uh-huh.
And I have no idea when really most of my kids knew
Mm-hmm.
about Santa, because I'm sure they thought like I did when I was little. So I was the second of four. I had an older brother, and I have twin brothers who are younger than me. And I knew pretty early that it was, what was going on and the whole thing behind it. But I wasn't going to say anything about it because I had little brothers and I didn't want to ruin for them primarily. But, there was also the selfish, if they know I know about Santa, then maybe I'll get fewer presents kind of a thinking as well. I'm not going to lie. I did think that. Probably was never true because you're still getting presents even after Santa. Uh, you know, Even as a teenager, my parents would set things up at night and we'd have something to wake up to. Because at that point, it's a tradition. It's a thing that you're doing, you know, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So, but
I I I was fairly old. I was probably 10-ish, 10 or 11. I mean, and mainly because I did not want to know. I never snuck under the tree and looked at presents. I didn't go
we did a
looking
lot of that.
around the house. No, I just was like, I wanted to be surprised. I wanted this. So, but then when I learned it, and then all of a sudden realized, then the Easter Bunny isn't real either, and the tooth fairy. I mean, it was like I put all these things together. It was like so depressing. I mean, I
Oh,
never really enjoyed Christmas the same way after that. I mean, it was like
hmm.
I just ignorance is bliss was really. And after that point, it was definitely more I got more out of Christmas by doing the giving than the receiving.
Right, right, right. Oh, okay. I'm gonna highlight this for Mary because this is awesome. We did all that Santa stuff when I was growing up, but I and most of my siblings never really believed in Santa Claus. The giant tarped mountain in the basement was probably the tip off.
Yeah.
There was one year, this was several years after I knew, but my mom would hide our presents in different places. Sometimes she would hide them in her loft in the garage. And my older brother, he was always really good at finding stuff. So when we were younger, he would actually tip me off or give me hints and stuff like that. But there was this one year my mom hid them at my aunt's house, probably because they went shopping together. Well, we go over to my aunt's house and busy doing Christmas stuff and everything. And my mom's like, we're wrapping some presents. I bought you some. I told you I brought you presents. I'm wrapping them. Go in the bedroom and hide until I tell you we're done. Like, okay. So I go in the bedroom, and then what's under the covers? This big stuff is under the covers, just with the blanket thrown over. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to go over there and look. I move the covers, and there's the presents that I actually want. She put me in the bedroom with the presents I wanted, and she was wrapping other presents in the other room.
Oh.
And still makes me laugh. I didn't say anything. I'm like, okay, awesome.
Hopefully they're for me. Oh, yeah.
So I don't know. But I think my kids have been of the same, we don't want anyone to know what we're thinking kind of a thing. But my youngest is really pushing is is Santa real? Is Santa real? Is Santa real? And the other ones never did that.
Mm.
They never asked me. They never brought it up.
How old is the youngest?
So he is 9.
Hmm.
So this will be,
Yeah.
yes, this is what's going on kind of a year. And it's interesting to me that he's the only one who does that, and that there's finally an opportunity for me to actually
Have that conversation.
have that kind of a conversation, because I haven't before. Um, but so the other ones, I don't know exactly when they knew, but I know when they really know, right? And so it's kind of this, we've never said anything, but it's the wink, wink. Yes, Santa is blah, blah, blah. What do you want for Santa?
Hmm.
Kind of a thing. Because again, they have a sibling who is still under the story.
Yeah.
And yeah, and to me, this is how I've always thought about it. This is how, like, I thought about it when I was little. I thought about it when I found out everything. Is that I think that adults are terrible at being kids and living into a narrative story. And so for me, like, I understand a lot of there's people out there who are really actually legitimately traumatized when they find out, and their trust in their parents and in God maybe even has taken a hit because of it. And I don't know. I don't know how to speak into that kind of a experience, because that wasn't my experience. My experience is that it is a story, and it is a narrative, and it is a ritual and a tradition that teaches about charity and giving without needing to be known as the giver, right? And so that's how I've explained it to people, and even I guess I have explained it to my older kids, like that, like, and to them, they are like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because even now, even with them finding out, I think I'm still going to continue the narrative, because I want something where I'm giving something to them and there's no expectation of them thanking me for it, right? And
I do that.
every,
We still do that, and I have special. My best friend from high school, she would always, and it was a tradition in her family, but the Santa gifts were always wrapped in comic newspapers.
oh.
Because if you wrap the paper, I mean, if you use in paper,
Right?
guess what? It's going to look pretty suspicious. And it's also
No, yeah.
hard to hide rolls of paper that are Santa paper,
See, I thought about that when my kids were little, and I said Santa uses our wrapping paper. that,
Uh,
that was
So
my
what I've done is I purchased some colored gift boxes, patterned gift boxes. And I just put the gifts in those, and they're reused every year. And it's just my line was, yes, I store them for him. I put out empty boxes before I go to bed at night, and then he uses whatever he needs to use.
There you go. Right.
But
uh,
yeah, the whole I don't want to, be. Isn't that weird? You gave your present has this dotted paper, and so does the one from Santa. Or Santa's using the
yeah.
paper you used for me last year.
Yeah. And it's like when a really young child comes up to play with you, are you going to say, no, that's not really a cookie that you're giving me, when they're putting up some random piece up to your mouth for you to eat, like you're
No, you're like, oh, how delicious is it? And yum, 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 yum. Yeah.
right, you're living into their world. And so, like, yes, there's a way in which you could see that, oh, this is an untruth and this is lying, but there's also a way you can see it as being living into that childhood magic of, yeah, and magic in a good way, like the imagination, the idea of understand the understanding of ritual. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
and just being gracious, and accepting and living in their world with them and participating with
Yes,
them.
right. And that's a hard thing for adults. We might not think that we're struggling with that, but most adults they're not very interesting compared to kids. You don't play make believe. You don't, for most of the things you do in the world.
No.
Sometimes we wish we could, paying the bills or something.
Yeah.
Pretend
Well,
that I have.
reading my fantasy novel and then start imagining what life would be like with that character.
Mm-hmm.
Because, that's the perfect guy. And
Yeah, yeah. And so that's why I like things like Halloween and Santa and all of these things, because it gives an easy opportunity for an adult to step out of our really strict propositional, everything is factual world into something that, I mean, and I still think it's factual. I still think in a sense, like Jonathan Peugeot will say, Santa's real because there is meaning behind him.
yes.
Like, there's something that's going on that is deeper than a normal thing.
Right. He
And I
is
think
real.
that's true.
And anytime somebody is giving in that way,
Yes.
they are embodying Santa.
Right. Right. And so, then you ask questions like, what is embodiment and what does that look like? And how does it work in our world? Is it only the fact that this is a thing and it's only a thing, or can it have something else beyond that? And I
What do
think there's
you
a
think?
lot. I think there's a lot to say about the fact that things have meaning that can be inherent to them, but they're often assigned by you, by the stories that you tell. Like your family history has meaning because it's your family history.
Right. Or even, I'm going to kind of, people were traveling in India and they found these masks, and they thought they were really cool masks and they wanted to bring them home and put them on their wall and stuff like that. And their guide is just like, and the guide was like a Christian leader, and he's like, these are possessed by demons, but if you don't have that in your head or in your culture, to it's like you can think something is super harmless, or you can think it's it's
Mm-hmm.
you built a story, you built a totally different story, you took it out of its context,
Right.
for what's the reality of what's going on.
Right. And both two things can be true at the same time. You can have something like that happen, and there is something legitimately spiritual attached to it that you're bringing home. But that's also not necessarily the case, because if it were the case in the same way every time, then you would see it manifest in the same way every time, and you can't and you don't. So what's up with that? It's like, how does the power get there? Why? And that's a question we can't always answer.
Right. But on the
Sometimes.
flip side, some people, are experiencing something strange going on in their house because something is manifesting, even though they didn't know about it. Now, why does it happen sometimes and not others? It could be, you know, they did something and didn't even realize it that activated the spirit.
Mhm.
But,
Right. Like, who knows? Like, there's so much complexity and depth to that. And so it's never, I would say never, an either or thing. Just like if somebody is participating in the Eucharist, they're not going to be benefiting from the Eucharist, but maybe they will, right? And it's not like this, you checked a box and there, and so that's where our scientific knowledge and worldview kind of breaks down, because it's not going to work according to our rules, right? And I think that for some people, it could be that a narrative like Santa would actually, it could potentially do harm, because you don't, because everybody is different, and every child and every family is different.
Mhm.
If the family and the child is only taking away some really superficial commercial story, and they're attaching this knowledge of Santa to other things in their life, then potentially that's very damaging. But it doesn't have to be like that for everyone. And so I think this is, one of those things where it's a matter of conscience and a matter of use some discernment, right? Like if your child is of the really highly or what would be the word I would want to use there? They're looking at the world in a very, very literal way. Some kids do that. Then maybe that's a cue to you to not do something like participate in a Santa narrative. But you can't presume that everyone's like that, and
Right.
that it's not going to give benefit and insight to everyone.
Right. I mean, I think of my autistic nephew, and it was super traumatizing for him to
Right.
learn, and it's like maybe that would have been better not to do that tradition with him. Maybe do something slightly different.
Yeah, or
They did
explain it
because,
a different way if you
yeah,
want, or
exactly. But and of course he learned it from mean children at school, and
Mm,
um,
yeah, right. And that's another thing is like
yeah, and
even
he was far
that.
older than the others because
Mm,
he just had this innocence, and they didn't want his parents didn't well his mother didn't want him to be disenchanted and stuff like that. He still
mm,
believed, and it
right.
just was really, I mean, it. But the problem is it turned into a major trauma uh,
Hmm.
that could have definitely been handled differently. But
Yeah. Well, and as a parent, the other thing I will say is you can't always, or maybe ever, really determine or fix your child's worldview for them, right? You can't determine what they're going to be traumatized over, because every parent is going to do something that their child could then take as being traumatic, and you don't even always know,
right,
like, and that's why you should really, sometimes a little bit more discernment might prevent that or help that, and sometimes not. It's really, as a parent, it's kind of a toss up as to how your kids are going to turn out sometimes, and what they're going to think, and what they're going to blame you for, and maybe it's really up to you and maybe it's not. And those are hard questions and hard things to wrestle with as a parent sometimes.
yeah,
But yeah, I think that a lot of times we don't know our kids, and a lot of times we do know them, and we don't want to admit that we know them as well as we do. It's like we want to hold on to things for our own sake, instead of seeing, well, maybe it would be best for my child because of this reason or whatever.
yeah. It was interesting for me as my son, who's now going to be 22 at the end of this month. But as he was um, turning 18, and getting done with high school, and trying to figure out what all, and it was just one of those things where it's like I I got him through high school. I got him to drive. We didn't do driver's test or anything until it was like you need to get a job and I'm not driving you. So it was after he was graduated that we did the whole behind the wheel, get the test and all that stuff. I guess he did his behind the wheel in school, but it was the actual driver's test and getting his
Hmm.
license that didn't happen until afterwards. I wound up as bribery. I got a different car for him because he did not. I mean, there was something. I mean, I had a Kia. I mean, I would have been thrilled to have any kind of vehicle when I was in.
Right.
But he was like, I don't really like that 4 doors car. And I'm like, if I get a different car, would you like that? So I just traded it in. But Sanja Maganja, what a pushover is am I for a mother? But anyway, but it was like, okay, dude, you got a job, you're going to school, you're doing these things, but you're an adult now, and it was a conscious decision for me of I
Hmm.
will advise, but you make your decisions. And I think
Yeah.
you've got the son now that is at that age too, and I think you've got a similar approach where it's, um,
Yeah.
I love you, I want to support you and help you, but I have limits with how much I can do in
Hmm.
this way. Uh, but not only that, but you need to learn how to fly out of the nest, and
Hmm.
so how do you navigate that?
Right. Right. Absolutely. It's the parent-child dynamic is hard. It really is. But I find that to some degree you have to kind of release the idea that you can have that much control because they are their own person. And no matter what you do, they're going to see things in the way that they're going to see it. And it might not be the same way that you see it.
Yeah.
So
And
always,
who knows why they see it that way too. It's like, what
right?
it's something that they saw on YouTube. Was it something from school? uh you don't know exactly. I mean, you can ask, but how did
But
you
they
come?
won't always know either, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. But,
Hmm.
and then they come up and they don't know how to address an envelope, and I'm just like, what?
Yeah. No matter what, you're like, I thought we'd covered this, that, or the other thing well enough, and apparently,
No, or the whole wouldn't know how to write a check. He doesn't.
mm,
He cannot write cursive. None of them can anymore. But
right.
anyways,
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So, yeah, to some degree, that's just what I think is you need to either do well, you need to have the traditions and the kind of thing that you want for your household, and that's fine. And you need to realize that your experience is not everybody's experience as well.
right.
So
And that's
the
okay. It doesn't
yeah,
have to be. And the thing, it doesn't even have to be the traditions that you did. You can
right.
choose to do the others, but on your faith journey part of it, I mean, you should follow your spiritual leader and what they're teaching and
Mm,
doing.
absolutely.
So I think it's interesting that Santa Claus, how do we get from Saint Nicholas to Santa Claus?
Mm,
And really, it's as the centuries went by, the Dutch children brought the Saint Nicholas tradition to the United States, but they would call him Sint Nicholas instead of Saint Nicholas, and then sometimes it got twisted to Sinterklaas.
ah,
you know um and so you can kind of see Saint
mm,
Nicholas, Saint Sinterklaas, Santa Claus. I mean, you can eventually get there, just like the word Esteban and Etienne.
Mm.
Etienne is French. Esteban is Spanish, and then you get Stefanos in Italy, and it's Stephen, and it's like from Etienne to Stephen. But if you see how the different languages pronounced it over the time, you can see how Santa Claus and Saint Nicholas are, yes, the same. It's
Right. Yeah, that is fascinating. I always like to study some entomology for things because
yeah.
it's
So here I've
usually something
done
that you don't.
one.
Ooh. So the red is one
See
color,
how
and
it's
the other
inlaid?
things, yeah,
Yeah, and then the different colors are
that's
paper pieced back in.
that's pretty.
So, yeah, there's
I like
7 or
that.
8 different pieces of paper. So I've got little bits and parts all over the place right now.
All over the place. That is really pretty. I like the different choices of the colors you made. And I am almost done with my black stitching. See, I've got just a little bit more to go, and I ran out of thread. So I think this is the last one that I've outlined in black. So then I need to go and do all of the.
What will the animal be that
letters.
goes with that?
I don't remember. This is not a letter that can be used at the first of a letter. I know I've picked them all out, but I don't remember what this one is. Because this always goes at the end of a word. So it's not the beginning letter of anything, which kind of most of the other ones are the beginning of things. I should have brought the one down that I've finished. It's got a duck. So I'll probably bring that down another time because I've got more embroidery, and I want to get stuff done, but I never, or it takes a long time to get the bigger projects done. Okay, so Mary, this is hiragana, Japanese hiragana. This is the letter N or N, so it always goes at the end. I have every hiragana letter, or they're not letters, they're characters, and so they're all done in this. It's an applique, and then I've embroidered around the edges, and they'll all have embroidery, maybe paint to create the little animal, and then I'll do a block quilt with them all. Probably hang it up on the wall.
For a grandchild, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
After all that work, it's going to be a wall hanging. Yeah.
Right. It's not going to go on a bed. So yeah. I like doing smaller sized. I have bigger ones that I'm working on that I need to finish. A couple of quilts that I'm embroidering that I need to finish. And I'm never doing these size again because the smaller ones I can carry around and work on for moments at a time. And a big one, you can't do that. So it's much harder. And then if it's in the summertime, I don't want a big quilt that I have draped over me as I'm working on it. So I'm also doing one that has embroidered turtles, and I'll probably be working on that in the future as well because I've only got one block. So I have a ways to go. And I have other plans, and I want to get to those other plans. But I'm like, finish these, then I'll do it. So anyway, did you have anything else you wanted to add there?
Well, how did we get to the commercialization of Santa?
That's pretty recent.
It is.
At least a lot of it is.
Yeah. I mean, there was stuff during the Civil War where the Union Army had a skinny Santa that was giving presents to their side. And there were different poems that would come out.
Poetry, yeah. Poetry's a big deal. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
It was 'twas the night before Christmas, And I believe that was
Right.
I think it was before
Emmett
1850.
Clark Moore's poem popularized the image of a jolly, portly gift giver. By 1820, in the United States, stores were beginning to advertise Christmas shopping. And then in 1841, a life size Santa model in Philadelphia attracted many children. But then, yeah, um, I think,
And then you have the Victorian era with Charles
yeah,
Dickens and the Christmas Carol, and that really popularized a lot of just what we think of as Christmas traditions and things like that.
right. And Queen Victoria's husband was from Germany, and he loved the Christmas trees, and so, and then they're kind of like just like the royals are. Now everybody, if Queen Victoria does it, then we have to do it too. Plus, her empire was around the world. The sun never set on the British Empire in her era, and so that was really and then I think another thing, in the 20th century was where Coca-Cola really had the
the
holly
Coca-Cola
jolly.
ads.
Right. And it was because Coke was usually only a summertime beverage, and they wanted to start going year round. And so they were having this big, fat, chubby, happy Santa dude drinking a Coke. And I mean, you've seen lots of memorabilia that has that. So that's really the commercial aspect, and how that popped in. And what's funny to me is that one of the business analysts that I worked with when I was at Blue Cross, she was from India, and she's just like, I love Christmas shopping, and I celebrate the commercial part of Christmas. I do all the traditional religious stuff that my family does, but we celebrate the commercial side. I love to put up a Christmas tree and have lights and all of that stuff. So I thought that was kind of a funny contradiction, but I do see people, especially in the after Christmas shopping, I do see people of other nationalities that are purchasing lights and things that they will use for.
Right. Yeah, I've had some friends who are like that as well. And I mean, and that too is a good example of when you are engaged in something, how much of that is participating in the original intent of it as well? That's a really good question to ask. It's just because there's a whole bunch of people that only go to church on Christmas, maybe Easter. And it's like, are they, and maybe they're even professing Christian, or maybe they're not. And so, it's a fair question to think about.
And what's motivating them? Is it just to make their mother shut up, or is it, an act of piety on their own? They don't, they don't bestir themselves every week, but they do make it a habit of going.
Right. Right. And I think a lot of that is stuff that, sometimes maybe it's not our place to judge, and maybe, but at the same time, it's like, well, just because you do something doesn't mean that you should then decide that, oh, yes, I'm a Christian because I do this and this, and that makes me a Christian. Well, again, I'm not going to say they're not necessarily, but there's discipleship that needs to happen there.
Yeah.
A lot of discipleship opportunities around Christmas and even the celebration of Santa. So,
yeah. Well, even, like the jingle bell ringers for the Salvation Army, sometimes they're dressed like Santa. They don't have to be, but I know some of them wear, Santa or elf hats or different things, whatever gets their jingle.
Yeah. It's just lots of things to consider and think about. And I think primarily it's we should be cognizant of where other people are and respectful of their positions, whatever those are as well. Like, that's why I would, one of the only things I like, if you celebrate Santa or not, if you have this meaning or not, I don't really care. If you're going to go tell your kids, go tell everybody about Santa, well, what's your motivation for that? Why are you doing that? Is that a kind thing to do?
And is it your place to do
And
that?
is it your place to do that? Yeah. Like, that's where I would kind of draw a line and go, maybe let's not do that, because I don't see how that's thinking about others in an empathetic way, personally.
Right. It's more like, are you being the Grinch?
It's,
The Grinch who
yeah.
stole Christmas.
Well, and I would say the same about evangelism as well. Are you trying to push it just for the fact of, I'm supposed to evangelize, or are you doing it out of a true concern for the other person and
Right.
desire to share the love that you have? I think there's a massive difference in those two positions.
Yes. And or is it a I'm right and you're wrong thing?
Right.
Or is it, we need to get 21 new converts this month to meet our number quota? And it's like, as far as I know, Jesus never had quotas that he said, okay, you guys got to go out and heal 36 sick people each this week.
Right.
That's
Like,
not how
he wasn't passing out like spreadsheets and telling people to fill them in. And
right.
yeah, right. Yeah. Be thoughtful to other people and where they are and how they're thinking about things. And I think in a lot of this too, you can really have conversations that help you to open your mind to other people. Anybody you meet, whether you agree with them or whether you don't, you can learn something from them.
Yep. One of the things I think that's important to think of too, my church is named after Saint Herman. He was a monk from Russia, and he came across Siberia and worked in Alaska. I almost said Africa. He worked in Alaska, and they, so they're with the Inuit people, the Eskimo, and all of that. And he and his fellow monks were not working to convert; they were bringing orthodoxy into that life. I mean, so there was this natural connectiveness of these people were already in tune with so much of nature, and then it was just a matter of I wouldn't say adapting orthodoxy, because they weren't doing that, but it was honoring the people and teaching them how this is reflected and how orthodoxy brings this all around. And so there are certain songs that we sing at church that are from Alaska, from those people. The tunes are Alaskan hymns.
Oh.
And that's something that's important to orthodoxy, is that orthodoxy, I mean, yes, there are the core tenets that need to, the creed and all of those things, but the culture also can be reflected within orthodoxy, and that is all right.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that could bring up a question of syncretism and what does that look like and where you draw the lines and all of that. But I mean, it's like, well, if you want to get all pedantic, then things are going to be hard to determine what's what, and where do you draw the line of tradition and allowing cultural expression, things like that. And there's a difference between imposing things and trying to trick people and genuinely bringing them in under your wing and giving them a spot in your society, in your
right. And what is
community.
the loving thing to do? One of the things that the Orthodox always did was they would bring the scriptures and translate them into the local languages. the Serbians were some of the first people that, and all of the scriptures and the church things were translated into those languages so that the people of that area, again, accepting their culture, accepting their language, and we can do this in your language too. It won't inhibit us. So I think I think that's really awesome and cool.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. So are you genuinely including people into this tradition or something else? Yeah.
Yep.
It's a good distinction. I like that. All right. Well, I guess that's about what we had to talk about tonight. I enjoyed it.
It was nice. It was a little bit different than what we've done, but I enjoy that we do something special to reflect on something about the holiday season. So
right.
It was awesome.
Awesome. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And for those who are unaware, you can always join the channel, which helps us to do what we do here, to pay the bills and do all of the things that we do here on the channel. If you're interested in that, there's like a join button there. And it's only like a couple dollars a month, and you can help us out with equipment and other things like that. And so what we're doing here on Pilgrims in a Holy Land is we're trying to talk about church history and systematic theology and the church and all of these things. And mostly we've been focused on the early church, and that's really not going to change. But maybe we'll have a few more conversations that jump ahead to what we're doing today and things that impact us today and things like that. But I don't know. We'll see. We're going to have some different things in the new year just because I know it's going to be a new year and things will develop in some way, shape, or form. I don't know. I don't know what that will look like. But next time we will plan on talking about the Shepherd of Hermas, which is a very interesting text and one that I think people should know about a lot more.
It's a very early text, and it was very, very popular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very popular. They have a lot of copies, just manuscript copies. So that's, it was circulated widely and people read it a lot.
Yep.
So we will be talking about that. And I should mention this as well. So hang on a second. Sorry. On my website for my podcast, which is Genesis Marks the Spot, you can go to the store tab, and I now have stuff for sale. I have prints. You're like, what does this have to do with Genesis? It's a mud skipper. I don't know what it has to do with Genesis.
It's cute.
Not everything that I sell on there is going to directly be related to Genesis, because it's also going to be my art. But you can go, and all of the links should work for buying stuff, or you can contact me directly for some of the stuff, because then I could sign it for you if you wanted. This is actually going out to somebody this week, so excited.
No, you can't have the mud skipper, huh? Or not that.
Yeah, well, you can order one, or you can contact me and I'll sign you another one. And there's stickers and stuff too. So
cool.
Fun things, that's all.
Fun things by Carrie.
All right. Well, I wish everybody a good week, and I think we'll be meeting again here before Christmas. But if not, I want to make sure everybody has a good Christmas and good holiday season, and that if you're stressed or anything, drop something. You don't have to do it all, okay?
I simplified my decorating this year. It's okay. Yeah. It still looks nice.
You don't have to do it all. It's fine.
Yep.
So I'm giving you permission to not do it all. Do important things, but it's not all the same. It doesn't all matter.
The sun will still come up tomorrow. At least I think it will.
Pretty sure it will. Yeah. Maybe. It is December, so you never know. All right, everybody. Good night, and God bless.
Good night.